Hi guys, so I want to talk to you about project management today. Welcome to the class. One of the largest growing fields in IT is project managers. Since early 2000 to 2007, everything has doubled. Today, if you look at global corporations where almost all organizations are stretching their wings to become a global workforce and a global institution, they're looking to hire project managers who think on a larger scope and size, who have experience with working with United Kingdom, Australia, um, Poland, for example, is another great place where a lot of tech companies are moving into in Warsaw today. One of the big things about project management, they become certified and get actual global certifications in different aspects because of the workforce going so much through Microsoft today. A lot of the projects out there fail to look at what went wrong, and this is where a lot of training is going into project managers today. I'm kind of working this a little bit backwards in a thought of reverse with you guys to think about the end result of things. I like to think about what the end is in mind before I even begin a project. That's why I always talk to users and stakeholders. So stakeholders can be anybody from using the project to paying for the project to your company CIO who is initiating the project. And what they find is the end result, the ultimate perfect scope of the project, or the size, the dynamics, which a scope of a project can have many and multiple mini projects inside of one project that need to be managed that are all part of the end result scope. So when you think with the end in mind, it kind of gives you a clearer project projection to start working with and control that chaos factor. And it also gives you a way to think about the end results, which I always have teams do, and make a closing report, evaluate on a SWOT analysis in the beginning of their strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats of the project and each individual team member, because your team members are your strongest assets in any project. And the alignment of those people, the human capital, and the management styles that you do this is always the number one strategic advantage in any single organization or project projection. One of the big things I look at is what went wrong. A lot of project managers like to look at, before they start another adventure, what went wrong with other projects that were similar in scale, size, scope, monetary, financial aspects, or say the project itself. Maybe you've already done the project prior and now you're doing an upgrade into your phone system or your IT software capabilities. So you want to look at the end results and what went wrong, the exit polling from stakeholders and individuals in human capital that worked with you on this project or with other project managers, and discuss that aspect before we even start a project and institute different ideas and ways of managing a project. There's advantages to project management, better control for the human resources, number one, financial, the physical. You're always looking to improve relationships with managers themselves or others, team leaders, the end result with a customer. You're always looking to create shorter times. Why do I say times and lower costs? Well, if you're working for a company like MITRE Corporation who deals with gigantic project managements, especially in the healthcare initiative, they just hired 23 individuals to be project managers because they have that many projects going on, where all of their projects are mostly government related, whether the Treasury or creating a new airline navigation system. They have massive amounts of projects that all are looking to do strict timeline deadlines and scope, but they're looking to do higher quality, creates reliability, gain profit margins for the government or whoever their private individual might be. And interestingly enough, they're always looking at regulations, and that has to be something that goes into every single project management as well. And sometimes with government contracts, which we all know, there's a deadline. If you pass the deadline, you're going to have penalties and actions. You may lose your contract, versus if you get the project done 2-3 months ahead of time and you allow yourself some time in the scope to have improvements, you can probably be rewarded other contracts. And this is one of MITRE's philosophies too, is always doing continuous improvement on their abilities and looking at past projects and managements and how they can assess to make better management out of other projects that are similar in design, so they can keep getting continuous project improvement themselves. There's team leaders like Danny Moore I'm going to try to get from MITRE to talk to us via Skype this semester and do an interview about what it is in his role today to reevaluate and assess projects and project managers and how they conducted business for MITRE Corporation. And his whole role is about continuous improvement for project managers and creating new models for project management control and investment. So what is a project? It's a temporary endeavor. It can be small or large. It might be something on a global scale where IBM has done real-time management of all their employees and found methods for individuals in Japan versus United States or New York to meet and communicate, dealing with time differences, or real-time actual data marts, or individual stakeholders can come into and see a project and evaluate it on a scale, sharing that information. A project might be as short as adding 4 new phones into an office space, updating software to 20 computers. It could be anything, and it can be terminated at any time, but most of them all have termination deadlines because it's a way to keep business continuity going. So a lot of IT projects, like I said, a couple, maybe you're adding 10 laptops to a small department. You're upgrading the software. Maybe your college, which we're working at right now, is making a more robust wireless system, or investing time and money into the online courses so we have more access to software to get information to you as students. There's all kinds of different projects in the scope. The interesting thing about being an IT project manager is you get to grow as IT grows. One of the cool things, and I brought this back from Gartner from 2008, is the idea, I love green IT. If we think about continuous improvement and government regulations, no matter the size or scale of your business, even if you're doing something small, we have to think about green IT and project management today. One of the hardest things for organizations to do if they're doing something simple as an upgrade is managing how they get rid of the old technology. Because you no longer can just haul and dump away monitors and different aspects of computers. There's a whole aspect and scope of how you have to think in project management about green IT and investment of new technology, and when the correct time is, and whether or not that investment's worth it, and what the ramification is of investing this with all the old hardware and what you will do with the hardware, or the cost of breaking contracts or upgrading software to something else and the downtime. Today, a lot of the business process modeling is evaluating the value of the project itself before it even starts. Social software, a lot of companies have gone to in virtualization, but today the bigger aspect in the project scope too is security. You have to think about the scope of security by adding investment or taking away. Is it safer to keep the security and the social software you're using, or is it a problem that your data could be taken? Should we invest in all new software upgrades just on that, and what the scope of that whole project will be? One of the interesting things that happened before was Nicholas Carr came out with an idea in a book that said, "Does IT matter?" And he questioned the value of IT as a sustainable investment, and whether or not it was actually something that could be brought into a different shape or a form, or is it something that's just a new item, a new thing? Do we need this? Today in business continuation, one of the biggest aspects is that global IT advantage, to where even the smallest of companies is selling everything online. So the question of does IT matter becomes an almost contrasting idea of, if we do not invest in IT, how limited in scope are we in our adventures to actually bring on new clients. One of the small companies I worked for before was a aluminum manufacturing company in Pennsylvania, and they didn't understand the ramifications of not having something as simple as online sales. They relied on a few people to get out their product to salesmen, which created a great business stretch, but they were stretched across the country. And I asked them the question of, if you can do this with two, what could you do with a website that can reach thousands, in a day, in 2 days? And the question then became, how much investment and time would they need to institute new human capital into creating a whole new market space on a global scale? And could they handle the investment in hiring more people to do the products to get it out? Because they had so many interested stakeholders immediately with the idea when they brought it to their current sales market force. One of the great things about projects is the uniqueness of every purpose. Every single project has a different scale, a different timeline, a different cost, and always a different stakeholder at the end. When I say stakeholders, these are the individuals that are, one, financially supporting it, or the end user in the process, such as maybe it's me buying a book off of Amazon. I could be a stakeholder. So you'd want to do user task analysis to understand what I need as a user. Or it could be an internal person or internal policy regulation. If you're working in healthcare industry, there's constant upgrades today to every aspect in IT as laws change and develop. So these project attributes are really interesting, because as a project manager, you're always considering different laws, regulations, scope, time, financial, and most importantly, who are you trying to satisfy? Your project sponsor is a key term that a lot of people like to use. Sorry, my dog's barking. And trying to understand what we need to get this scope under control. A lot of times it involves dealing with the uncertainty and matters involved with bringing all the aspects of security and the unknowns into focus by having meetings and continued meetings with individuals and stakeholders to constantly understand what you need for its purpose. So project managers work with project sponsors all the time, or all the stakeholders. They are constantly trying to meet team demands and involvement and reach goals. There's a lot of software out there that you guys will look at and utilize to try to understand what is needed inside of these projects and goals. A program of group-related projects are managed sometimes by one individual, and that has benefits because he understands all the constraints and scopes and constant changing mechanisms inside of it by the stakeholders. So project managers oversee everything from one single project to multiple projects and have multiple bosses and stakeholders they deal with. So it can be a very daunting job. One of the big things is understanding triple constraint of project management. First, it's the scope or the goal of the project, the cost and goal of the project, and the time goal of the project, how long this will take to do the time. These are called a triple constraint that all project managers are looking to satisfy. Project management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to get this project finished and to meet the deadlines, the requirements. Project managers are always trying to deal with that triple constraint, which I just said about here, and you can see the diagram, to meet the target, the goal for the users. There's kind of 9 areas in project management, that framework, or knowledge areas. There's a lot of knowledge management personnel like to think of this. The first is the scope of the how big is this? How big can we handle with inside the time, the cost constraints, and will it meet the quality that the stakeholders need? Will it have all the bells and whistles that will make our user happy in the end? A lot of times people don't think about the human resource management aspect of the project management. There's 4 stages in this, which I'm having you guys read about a little bit, with the Bowman and Deal concept of human resources. One of the hardest to deal with is usually the political human resource frame and getting around objectives, constant constraints with a political frame with political leaders who want to control everything end up managing the IT manager's job if they're not cautious. Communication management is one of the biggest things. Is I always tell my senior students, how are you guys going to communicate? How are you going to create a timeline, a time management project inside of this? What are the risks? How are you going to manage the risks and procurement of the management itself? So the stakeholders, if you're thinking about these people, they're really the ones affected by the project itself. They can be the sponsor, they can be the project manager or project team manager, because you might have multiple teams working on this. There might be one key manager aligning all the project managers' work to make sure their lines and scope are in line with each other, because if one person is lagging and they need that data, they need that code written before another group can continue, somebody has to manage each side. Customers are always stakeholders and users. Suppliers can be considered stakeholders too, because if you need a nut or a bolt to put together a camera or a light bar on a police car, and the police are the stakeholders that need a police car outfitted to do criminal justice, you'd have to make sure all the suppliers are getting all the parts together, the technology intertwined into creating their communication devices, if this is your project, would be engaged all in the same timeline. And unfortunately, there's always opponents to this project. These are the naysayers, the negative Nancys, but they're also the bean counters a lot of times, the accountants who look at the value of each and every project investment. And that's something you'll look at too a little bit in this course, is understanding project value, project investment scale. So the 9 project management areas, or knowledge areas, are kind of these key components. The core knowledge areas, the scope, time, cost, and the quality is always something to consider, because if you can't reach the quality scope of what a stakeholder is really wanting, then you're not going to be able to actually take on the job. And sometimes a lot of the project manager will look at this and say, this is outside of our scope, of our abilities. If they're looking for a specific quality of output in, say, metal, where metallurgists work, their project managers may say to them, what, we can't do this, we can't reach those quality specs, we have to pass on the job. Because a lot of times, if you try it and you fail, the outcome is the company's business continuity plan has to change, because you no longer can have the same stakeholders looking at you, because they may not want to hire you. Human resources and communication is always the number, one thing in my book to look at. Understanding that you're aligning the correct people for the correct job, that they're not outside of their scope, their abilities themselves, their knowledge. Making sure that you're taking on proper risks, not taxing and asking your employees to be able to write code 10 hours a day, 4 days a week to meet your scope. You have to think about these little elements that work with humans and consider how projects fail because of managing people and investment in human capital, to where they have to understand that people will fail, problems will happen, life happens, and you have to build time into that scope line to understand that. But most of the people that work with this are great leaders, and that's something you have to think about too, is what makes a great project manager is usually a great leader. And looking at leadership styles, which we'll talk a little bit about, one of my favorites is Dr. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he looked at 7 traits of great leaders and leadership and what it took to become these great leaders, project managers, world leaders, and created a whole process for that. So some of the biggest things that you guys will learn about, and one of the most important to me, is always the project charter. That's where it sets up everything. It tells what the scope of the project is, the timeline for the project, what each individual's role in the project will be in the scope, and an analysis of how you're going to evaluate each stage or milestone marker during the project to make sure everything is in alignment. The critical change scheduling of the time, looking at cost value, earned value management costs, creating an charts. These are simple flow charts which are very visual and easy to see, where one piece aligns with another in the project and interconnects, and making sure they're all on the same timeline and working together. A lot of these, they call them super tools today, have incredible integrated software packaging that allows you to put in the scopes. Once you have your charter together, the requirements and everything into one integrated package. Microsoft does a couple great things, and you can do this in Excel pretty quick to help you with this. But the teams, like the senior capstone teams we work with, they always have stages and milestones and report requirement analysis. We do for them just for the small things like your course. And I'm asking you guys, your final project, to think about these things. And in the end, the lesson learned, you're going to do too from what you've learned through various aspects in this. There's always a progress report, weekly meeting. Then every team that I've worked on, there's kickoff meetings where a lot of times groups like MITRE, where I'm friends with a lot of them, will have a kickoff meeting, but they'll have the whole team go out to get together just to meet and understand personalities and what they need, and all do SWOT analysis of each other, play games and do different aspects to kind of see and feel how they work together. And MITRE has come up with a very creative endeavor to where no one person is really sold on any project. If someone sees something that they can maybe do better or think they can help, it's their job to come over and just sign up on a team and get into it. And maybe they leave once that aspect's done and go back over, and they're integrated into the charting. And they may request, hey, let me do this. I really know this well. I can code this aspect. I've done something like this on a project before. So it's kind of a fluid project management process, and project managers always kind of look to borrow talent internally, or even hire external project managers to help on their internal project. One of the big things that I love seeing is, the what went right, what went wrong idea. But if you look kind of backwards and you can find a comparative study, that's why I'm asking you kind of the first week to think about looking at some of these larger companies and global and things that are out there, and they have a lot of resources to research. If you can find a project and find out what went right, you can incorporate those aspects into the idea of your project flow. Many of the projects today, it's like the wheel. There's already been invented, so there's another project out there, or maybe a scope of the project inside your project that can be borrowed and brought into it. We always look at doing this, one, for continuous improvement. You want to find ways to make an advantage for your stakeholders, whether it be cost, speeding up the timeline of the project, moving something through the project faster, getting more skilled labor into one of the process aspects, bringing stronger coders in, or someone who knows a certain language that might be able to help you more, or someone that has communication skills. Maybe you want to bring in a human resources director to help with problems that are happening in the team that you don't know what's going on, but they can evaluate. Maybe there's a conflict of interest between two people that they can come in and change that, resolve it. So these are all different things in the scope of a project you're going to be thinking about. Thinking about what makes that success. And most time it goes back to that triple constraint: the scope, the time, the cost, goals. Were they all met and satisfied, the customer supported and done well? If this happens, then in most cases projects are considered successes. I like to look at the back end when we evaluate and you do an exit polling. That's when you really see the successes to me, because people speak highly about certain aspects that worked well, certain aspects that brought continuity to this problem. So when we talk about what helps projects succeed, the number one thing to me is always support from the stakeholders, the sponsor or the executive in charge of this. If they don't have an investment support on this, your project is going to have a lot of constraints and hardships just trying to manage time, getting the money to support, getting allocations, getting the software if you need to upgrade, getting the hardware to do the project. Understanding there has to be clear business objectives. A lot of times in the IT world, we think about software, we think about code, but we don't understand a business objective. And that's one of the biggest things that project managers have to really learn, is business objectives and understanding why they're doing this on a business value. Because they can pull the plug on the project if the business end of this is not going to meet the scope that helps the company ultimately. A lot of times it's hard to say, and a lot of new students don't want to do this because they like to bite off more than they can chew, and they don't like to minimize the scope because they think, well, if it's not big enough, I won't look impressive enough with this. This is one of the things the senior students in the undergraduate level always have time constraints with and problems with, is minimizing the scope and teaching them how to manage a scope to where they can do it, still have life and family, friends, time, like you guys will all have as graduate students and probably managers now, today, hopefully, and understanding different requirements. Well, one of the things too is, I'm going to hear me a lot talk about winners and leaders. They're going to be people that use every tool they can appropriately. They're going to emphasize great aspects of each and every project they did in the past and integrate that philosophy inside of it, creating a good path for success. They're going to find ways to streamline the processes because of knowledge, or asking peers who've done this project before, more importantly, not having any qualms about going and asking for help and learning. These are what winners do. They learn from others. They don't have fear of asking for help, looking at past mistakes and saying, why did they go wrong? Let's make sure that doesn't happen again. A program, a lot of times, is this related, and I've been talking about a little bit of scope, of multiple interjecting pieces inside of your project itself. Inside of one project, you may have hundreds of little projects. One of the projects I did for university was managing advertising for the past Olympics. And we created a series of short videos. So inside of all that, I had to do project management for time scope, constraints, cost to meet it, time deadline. I had to hire everything from art directors to photographers to videographers to sound to talent to read words I wanted placed inside of the advertisement. So a program can have many of aspects, not just in computer world, where we might have someone installing hardware, someone installing software, someone upgrading the wireless system, someone writing the new code for the software that's going to run whatever real-time management process is. But a project manager, in my mind, the biggest thing is the leader. They're the ones who make that directive decision and make sure everything flows. They're kind of the gatekeepers. Portfolio management in a group is almost today a whole nother job. They are individuals who are managing the entire portfolio of all the projects going on and all the investments in a company, and saying whether one's on track, one is not. Do we limit the scope? Do we change it over? Do we start another project? It's just helping our organization. So inside project management, there's already a growth to have project portfolio management, which is today a whole new job field. And these are usually experienced global project managers who upgrade to different levels of learning, and they are able to encompass everything from the scale in human resources management, and a lot of them are accountants as well, to understand the financial aspects of each individual and reevaluate the scope of the finances in a single project. But the project management, if you think about that, they are the people that are carrying out the projects themselves. They are the ones who are trying to keep everything on time, that triple constraint of budget and scope. They are the individuals who are sharing all the information to the stakeholders a lot of time as well, versus the project portfolio managers are looking at whether the projects themselves are a viable aspect to keep in continuation and keep going. Are they the right investment areas for a company? Do we have the right resources, and are they meeting our strategic goals instead of tactical goals? So a lot of the things we're thinking about this is going to be best practices, and the project managers are trying to make optimal, streamlined continuum for any business to meet the stated goals or the objective, and that's what you're going to be writing in your charter, finding out what the end is in mind. So this week I want you to think about what are some of the processes, what are some of the stages, like the 9 I showed you, the triple constraint, that are so imperative to project managers as you're talking and discussing in your discussion groups in the course, and see what models out there you can find that are interesting and how you could apply that to a real world situation in your life today. Maybe it's simple as time management projects for yourself with classes, or family scope projects. It might be something to think about as well, how you could apply something larger to smaller, or creating your own IT investment. A friend of mine recently found an application because he was having problems with his family on getting things done, because they all work. His wife and him both work 40, 50 hours a week, and they found an application to where it integrates on their phones for grocery shopping lists or needs. And every time they need something at home, they add the list, and when someone goes and gets it, they check it off the list. It's an optimizing way to change and evaluate a project or a life or a goal. So think of this a little differently this week, and I hope that you enjoy some of these first readings. I know the books will be a little bit late. That's okay. That's why I kind of designed it for the first week for you guys to do a little bit of exterior research and find something that's interesting to you and bring it into the course. This is a Socratic type of environment. We should be learning from each other. So I look forward to seeing some of your new stuff. All right, guys, have a great day.